am Alexander B. Stevens. This is What Is He Thinking? I'd like to welcome you to the podcast that doesn't perpetrate a fraud or tell you comforting lies, but instead gives you productive and constructive truths for the benefit of women from the perspective of men. What's going on? This is What Is He Thinking? I am Alexander Stevens, and we're back at it again for another episode. Today's topic is the biggest issue men have with the dating world today. The biggest issue men have with the dating world today. But before we dive deeper into that topic, I first want to talk a little bit about the biggest problem in the dating world, period, for both men and women. The biggest problem and issue in the dating world, period, no matter gender. In my opinion, the overall biggest issue in the dating world today, 2020, is too many options. Too many options. Now I know what you might be thinking. You are probably thinking what a lot of individuals that were raised in the Western culture think, and that is the more freedom you have, the better it is. The more choices you have equate to having more freedom. Therefore, the more choices you have, the better it is. But I'm here to tell you that both is true and false at the same time. Both true and false, good and bad at the same time. Since you pretty much already know the good parts of freedom and ample choices, I'd like to focus on the drawbacks of having ample, excessive amounts of choices. Drawback number one is that the more choices you have, or the more choices you feel like you have, the less likely you are to commit to or stick with one option. This doesn't matter much when it comes to frivolous options and choices like, I don't know, your favorite type of ice cream or choosing between different flavors of ice cream. But this can be critical when it comes to making a choice based off a list of imperfect options, each of which will require extensive amounts of work in order to make it a success. If one shows no commitment to a singular path or a singular person, if one doesn't exert full effort in order to make a difficult thing between two imperfect individuals work, then that is a formula for failure. Many times when people have a lot of options, they feel like if anything is difficult or going wrong with one option, that means that particular option was a wrong choice. But with dating, relationships, and dealing with other people, many times that's either not true or there isn't enough information to determine if it's true or not. So that's drawback number one of too many choices. Usually the number of choices a person has is inversely proportionate to the amount of effort and commitment they will expend toward exercising and exploring one of those choices, and that is counterproductive when it comes to dating, relationships, or finding love. All right, drawback number two is the illusion of choices. The illusion of choice. The illusion of choice is basically when the powers that be, outside forces, or your own mind make you think that you have more options than you really do. The illusion of choice is when you're considering more options than are actually feasible. Nowadays, 2 decades into the 21st century, an individual that's on the dating market can see a wide variety of people from a wide variety of different places online and on their TV. Because of this, most people subconsciously augment the number of viable romantic options that they have because subconsciously they are considering way more locations and way more types of lifestyles that they could live than are truly feasibly possible for their future. For some, making drastic life changes and moving to random, faraway parts of the country is possible and will happen. For others, drastically shaking up their life and changing their whole way of living could happen, but for most, it does not. So the options that you thought you had, you really don't. For example, when one is online dating, you see an endless catalog of singles, almost like when you're online shopping and you see pages and pages of merchandise that you could potentially buy. But the thing is, one, most people shop on websites in which they already know they can afford pretty much everything that's available to them. Two, merchandise are inanimate objects that cannot reject you or refuse you if they don't want you in their life. People can. Furthermore, to go along with the analogy, there are many cases that a lot of shoppers can't afford the people they desire in the online catalog they are perusing. They might think they can afford them because most people, especially women, overestimate their dating market value, but they cannot. And because they cannot, those certain individuals really aren't viable options at all. Afford? What are you talking about, Alexander Stevens? Well, when I say afford, I mean each person has their own self-determined romantic price or NC-17 price that you have to have enough currency and saving to get the opportunity to cash in on that option. Currency? Well, in the dating marketplace, your currency are your looks, your personality, your intangibles, your location, your availability, and for men, your finances. So, since most people have a sticker on their forehead that's invisible to everyone, there's no way of knowing the exact amount or combination of looks, personality, intangibles, location, etc., that's required in order to make that specific individual a viable option. For example, imagine you're online shopping at, JCPenney's or Kohl's or someplace where you know you can afford anything on the site. Then compare that to shopping on a jewelry website or a website that has a variety of cars of different makes and models but no prices. On the first example, all the options you see, all the choices of different merchandise you see are viable. In the second example, if you make $60,000 a year, despite you thinking a BMW is a viable purchase because you don't see the sticker price on the car, in reality, it is not a real option for you. So wasting time and mental energy on exploring, pondering, deliberating, or deciding between unrealistic, unviable options is not only a waste of energy, but it takes time away from other realistic options that you could have been exploring and determining whether they were right for you or not. So drawback number 2 is the illusion of thinking you have more choices than you really do and wasting time with non-viable choices. Drawback number 3 is the most complicated of all the drawbacks related to choice, but also the most profound in my opinion. Drawback number 3 is the paradox of choice. The paradox of choice. The paradox of choice is a concept, theory, and book first presented to the public in mass by an individual, a psychologist by the name of Barry Schwartz, approximately 16 years ago. Barry Schwartz, at the beginning of the 21st century, came out with a top-selling book called The Paradox of Choice. So many of the things I'm about to say come from either that book or his handful of lectures he's done on the topic that you can find on YouTube. So you can refer to that if you need references or you're looking for more detail. But today I'm going to go over the highlights of that theory. All right. That's all you're going to get right now on this video. If you want to listen to the continuation and the conclusion of this episode, or if you want to listen to one of my many other interesting and educational podcast episodes, I'm going to need you to open up your favorite podcast hosting platform and search WhatIzHeThinking. Look for the podcast by the same name as this one, and you can enjoy the rest of the episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, Amazon Music. You can find the podcast everywhere. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for new topics for me to discuss, please shoot me an email at whatizhethinking@gmail.com. And never forget, I'm not here to tickle your ear. My only goal is to tell you what you need to know.